Okay, we are ready to proceed, Mayor Jameson.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. You have before you a copy of tonight's agenda. There are a couple, or actually just one change. I'm going to move the delegation up from item number, delegation will be item number 7. Administrative inquiries will be item number 8. And with that, I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Dowie, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any questions to the motion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 3, any declarations of interest? And I'm going to ask council to speak because I don't have half of you on my screen right now. I've got a different screen than I'm used to. So if you could just speak up, that would work for me. So I have no declarations of interest noted. We're moving on to item number 4, announcements, awards, ceremonies, and presentations. I do have one, and I'd like to congratulate the Hay River Heritage Center as they celebrated their 20th anniversary. I was unable to attend as I was in self-isolation, so I'd like to thank Deputy Mayor Bouchard for attending in my stead. I'd like to take the opportunity also to thank all the people past and present that have worked so hard over the years to develop the Heritage Center. The importance of preserving the history of our community and the NWT is invaluable. So with that, I'm going to look to council. Any other announcements, awards, ceremonies, or presentations?
Your Worship, is Councillor or Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Your Worship, I also was able to attend a ceremony last week, the weekend before, for the Communities in Bloom as well, where they awarded some of their successful people that have won awards for their creativity and their cleaning up of their areas in the community. So yeah, it's obviously a good thing in our community to continue to clean up and become horticulturists. They had a bunch of people there, so it was interesting. It was all done in Bob and Meakin Park with everyone doing social distancing, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Nothing noted. Anything from administration?
Nothing from administration, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 5. You have before you a copy of the regular meeting of council minutes dated August 11th, 2020. Looking for a motion. And you will have to speak up again. I'll remind you that I don't have full view. Councillor Dowie, I can see. So I have them seconded by
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions? None being noted. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I can actually scroll through now. So I have motion carries. Thank you. Item number 6, there was no business arising from the minutes. I will move on to item number 7, delegation. So our first delegation this evening is the Hay River Senior Society, and they are doing a presentation on a food cycler pilot program. We have with us tonight Sandra Lester, who is the Vice Chair of the Hay River Senior Society, Ginger Lester, who is the Executive Assistant and Communications Coordinator for the City of Nelson, and Alex Heyman, Manufacturer Representative for Food Cycle. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all, and I'll pass it over to Sandra, I take it, or whoever's doing the presentation.
I'm not doing the presentation. Ginger and Alex will be doing the presentation. The reason I brought this to council is Ginger and the City of Nelson and Ginger have started this food cycler program, and it's been very effective in the city. And I live out in the corridor, as everybody knows, and I spend a lot more time at the dump than most people. And over the years, the dump has become basically worse and worse and worse for smell, debris, and so on. This food cycler program, if we could bring it into town, takes an enormous amount of organic material out of the dump. We don't have the same, it wouldn't be here all and end all, but it would certainly take a large portion. Ginger will give you the statistics. I think that we should implement something like this in the community. It's also very good for the people in the corridor because you have to make endless trips to the dump. If you have a food cycler program, you can store your garbage a little bit longer too. You don't, in the summertime, I almost have to go daily because of organic material. Anyway, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ginger and she's going to tell you a bit about the food cycler program.
All right, thanks, Sandra. So I'm going to speak from my perspective. I ran the program, actually, and Alex from Food Cycler was really a lot of help as well. But I ran the program from start to finish for the City of Nelson. So the City of Nelson and the town of Hay River have very different stories, I think, when it comes to where our waste is going. But I think we all have the same goal, and that would be to divert as much organics as we can into the landfill. So with that said, our community is actually looking at a curbside pickup as one option, but we were tasked a few months ago or in the spring with looking for other options. And so we piloted the food cycler, and I'm gonna let Alex, if you wanna chime in here for just a bit, kind of explain to Mayor and Council in Hay River what the food cycler actually is. I think that's important before we get too far into the presentation.
Sure, thanks Ginger for that introduction. So as you can see, the food cycler is an in-home food waste diversion tool. We position it as an alternative to composting that's very easy and just about as eco-friendly as composting. So the way it works is you essentially put your food waste into the machine, you press the button, and you have a chopping blade and also a heating device that dehydrates and grinds up your food waste, leaving you with a soil amendment that's about 10% of the original weight and volume of what you put into that machine. So then you can take your soil amendment and use it in your plants and your garden, or just apply it for landscaping purposes. What we found at Food Cycler is that up to half of residential waste is made up of food scraps. So by using something like this, you might be able to significantly reduce the amount of food waste going to the landfill. And as Sandra pointed out, also potentially reduce the amount of trips you're making to the landfill. So I'll pass it back to Ginger, but I'll be here throughout the presentation to answer any technical questions or questions about our municipal programs. And thank you very much for hosting us tonight in your meeting.
Yeah, so my actual presentation takes about an hour and a half, and so we've only got a few minutes. So I'm just going to highlight on a couple of things. First of all, we used a food cycler we actually piloted a food cycler in where I work at City Hall for over a year. And we loved it as staff. It was so easy to use. It's simple and it worked. And we took the soil amendment and we threw it into the garden plots out front of City Hall and worked like a charm. So we were then tasked to roll it out we didn't make it public per se. We rolled it out to 150 basically selected program participants. And if each participant did the initial survey, measured their use for 3 months, a week in each 3 months of the 3 months, and then did the exit survey, they were able to get a rebate. So we were able to bring the cost of the unit down for the pilot program participants by quite a bit. The end price was $155, which was people really liked, and it helped us get a good size pilot going. So the end results, because you've got the whole presentation there, and I've also sent you the survey results, and it includes every last comment that the community made. And so you get to see the good, the bad, the ugly, but overall, the program was very successful. We were able to, in a 3-month period, 151 households diverted 15 tons of food waste from the landfill. And the self-reporting, they indicate that they reduce their garbage because we have a garbage tag system. So people have to buy a garbage bag tag, put it on their bag and put it out to the curb in order for it to be picked up. So they're able to easily measure how many tags they were using. Most indicated that they reduced their garbage by half. So that was really significant to us. Yeah, so I was going to say, because I don't have a lot of time with you guys tonight, if you are interested in rolling out a program like this, a couple of my recommendations for you so that you can actually test it in your community, because Hay River is very different than Nelson, that you probably follow a similar pilot program that we did. And by having that initial survey, getting that initial, what are people doing right now? How could the food cycler impact the community? What are the end results? And I'd also recommend that you do some sort of either a Facebook group or some type of group to get that feedback from in real time, and also be able to answer questions. That was a big part of our pilot program, was being able to have Food Cycler and Alex on our Facebook group with us, because it is a little bit of a learning curve when you're starting to use these food cyclers, trying to figure out what do you put in it to get the best result. What else was I going to say? I had another point. Oh, if you were to do the pilot, one thing that just lessons learned is that if you could do a randomized pilot, because we actually did not do that. We actually went out to people that we already had through different programs through our energy retrofits program at the city. And I think that you get better results if you were able to do a randomized pilot, although that could be difficult if you aren't subsidizing the unit or giving it to them for free. So those are just a few of the lessons learned. But that being said, it was very successful. We're very pleased with the results. And when we've done a check-in with the 150 people, they're all still 5 months later using their units daily. So it's not a gadget. It's something that is kind of like your dishwasher or your refrigerator. It's something that you get very used to using, and the simplicity of it. I can't even tell you, it's just so easy to use, and the results are excellent. But I'm going to hand it over to Alex. Maybe he has something else he wants to add.
Maybe I'll just chime in quickly with a few comments. So as Jinder mentioned, Nelson was very successful with their pilot during the 3-month period, diverting 15 tons of food waste, which might sound relatively small, but when you scale that across the small number of participants that used it, it is quite significant. Another thing that's really important to us at Food Cycler with our product is using the Food Cycler doesn't just deal with the food waste you're creating, it also teaches you to actually waste less. Because you start dealing with the food waste on site in your own home, you start becoming a lot more conscious about how much waste you're generating. So we're not just a technology to deal with food waste, but we're also thinking about how can we influence people to make less waste in the first place. So I just wanted to mention that piece. We've got a number of municipal programs available, including bulk purchase programs and also subscription programs. So you can either purchase the units in bulk for residents or have like a per month fee that would include the rental of a food cycler, a warranty, and consumables associated with the program. So if this is something Hay River did want to consider, we would be very open to working with council and the city staff to developing some type of pilot program with you. So thank you very much for your time and for considering doing such a program.
I just want to point out too that one of our most significant results, even with comments, that the overall satisfaction rate from the entire pilot program was 4.4 out of 5. And these are people who use these units for 3 months straight. So I think the overall success rate was really good. but I think it would be, even though we had a great success rate, again, I think it would be important to test it out in your community first, maybe 100 or 200 units, and see if see how it's received.
Candace, can I make one more comment?
You sure can, go ahead.
One thing I neglected to mention, very simple, we had a meeting of the seniors before I actually brought this to Glenn for your perusal. And the Senior Society is willing to operate the project for the town of Hay River. It's just that we needed a municipality to run the program. So we will look after the distribution. We will look after record keeping and stuff for the town. So there would be no additional expense to the town, other than if you intend on subsidizing the units to get enough units into the community to make a difference.
Okay, so questions from council. Councillor Dewey, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you all for bringing this forward to us. I think that, obviously, I think it's fair to say that we've all got an interest in reducing the amount of waste that goes into our landfill. Ginger, and I could be off here. I was just trying to do a little quick math. But the investment for the city of Nelson was around $40,000. Would that be fair?
No, I don't think, was it that high? It's 150, 151, and we gave you, did you do times 125? Just getting my calculator out. 18,800.
Okay, sorry. I was on those two numbers together, your rebate plus.
Yeah, no, we just
Okay,
gave.
that makes sense. I was adding.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we definitely did invest.
Yep.
And actually, I just want to point out, one thing we haven't talked about is the GHGs, because one of the comments that we receive a lot is like, well, you're buying like a machine, and how is that going to be better than, just taking your garbage to the dump? And I wonder, Alex, if you might want to just quickly address the carbon emissions and what that looks like. Maybe you can use Nelson as the example.
Yeah, so to touch quickly on the GHG thing, that's always a concern we get, that how does building a device, shipping it, using electricity to operate it, compare to something like putting the food waste in landfill or a curbside collection program. And our research has shown that once you take into account the life cycle of the unit and compare that to the impact food waste has in the landfill generating methane gases, or the transport emissions from trucking around food waste, that usually the food cycler comes out far ahead. And that was what Nelson city staff found in their calculation as well, that when compared to a curbside program, the potential reduction in emissions was significantly higher with the food cycler. And what explained that was purely the transportation emissions. So the diesel fuel to operate another truck.
And just to point out, the food cycler actually, there's no methane produced, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, there's no methane produced during the processing of the food waste in a food cycler.
Correct, it's a fully aerobic cycle.
Go ahead, Councillor Dewey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess just for the, let's say for the end user, the person that has this unit, what would they be looking at for, I guess, like operating this thing and maintaining it and whatnot? I'd imagine it's probably not significant when you're consider it's a fairly small unit. Looks like it sits on a countertop. I think Sandra had one behind her there, so I'm guessing it's probably not significant, but what would they be looking at, say, end user, as far as maintenance and whatnot?
So the two costs associated with running the food cycler would be electricity and also filters that capture any odors. So each cycle uses about a kilowatt hour of electricity. Typically what we'll see is a family of 4 to 5 people will often run the machine daily, so maybe 30 kilowatt hours per month. A smaller household might run it every 2 to 3 days, again at that 1 kilowatt hour per cycle. The other consumable you will use is the carbon filters that capture any odors during the cycle. Those need to be replaced approximately every 3 to 6 months, depending on usage. And those have a cost of about $20 per filter. You can also run the unit outside or in a garage without filters if you so choose. They are technically optional. So you do have to consider the electricity and also the filter cost when doing the full life cycle cost of operating this.
Any further questions?
I have one more thing I just want to tell you guys. I have this unit sitting over at the Alice Cambridge room. When we're done tonight, I'm going to throw in a bunch of stuff, and tomorrow or Thursday, any counselor that would like to come over, let's say at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, if you can make it, drop by and have a look at the end product. We're very pleased with the end product. I've done 5 cycles with it, and haven't really been disappointed, except for when I did it completely wrong. But it's a really nice, easy machine to run, and it's going to be a real attribute to my household. So I think it will be an attribute to everybody's.
Fair enough. Quick question, Ginger, what is the population of Nelson?
Approximately 11,000 people.
Yeah, so we've got about a third of that. 11,000, okay. So when you did your pilot project, you invited 151, or you kind of put it out there and saw who responded?
Well, we had 150 units to work with, 151.
Yeah.
A couple extra units got sent our way. So basically we modeled the program on the number of units that we had. Yeah.
Thanks.
We had a certain budget to work with.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Any further questions from council?
A question, or?
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, so just so what the end product when it's done goes to where, like what it becomes is just like a soil type thing, so they can be put anywhere in gardens and stuff like that?
Correct. We recommend people use it in gardens. It's a very rich byproduct that comes out. It's a natural fertilizer with quite a desirable NPK value. We've done tests with gardeners of kind of lettuces and other plants grown with the soil amendment versus without, and you'll actually see in results that plants actually grow a lot faster due to the presence of the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus that's in there. So the best use is really in gardening applications. If you're not a gardener, we sometimes recommend that the municipality have some kind of drop-off program for people that don't want to use it, so that the soil amendment could be collected and used perhaps in a community garden or maybe on city property. It's best not to waste the byproduct because it's quite useful in those applications. So we always recommend, find a good place for it and complete the cycle. Have the food go from the earth through to the machine and then back into the earth for some positive use after that.
That's where I found a Facebook group was a really great way for us as a pilot program group, because I'm also part of the pilot program. We're able to come together, and not everybody has a garden. Some people live in apartments or condominiums, and they just threw it out there, and nobody has had an issue with finding a place to put their end product. I think only 3% of the entire group actually put their end product back into the landfill.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think with all the agriculture in town and stuff, there would be probably quite a few people that would be interested in it.
I think the animals can eat it too. And I think Alex can answer to that.
Yeah, it's not something we strictly recommend, since you get into a lot of quality control issues if it's going to animals. but we have people who work at Food Cycler who have chickens that feed their byproduct to their chickens, and they love it. We also have a casino using the commercial version of the Food Cycler, and 100% of the byproduct is collected by a pig farmer who then feeds it to his pigs. So it is possible to feed to animals, but we kind of give the disclaimer that you should know what's going to your animals and be in full control of that if that's an application you're choosing to pursue.
There's one more thing, you
Mr.
can
Grant?
put meat into this thing.
Sorry?
Meat products to a degree, as long as they're mixed properly with your other organics, you can throw meat into it where you can't do that with a composter. I composted the other day here and I had a leftover hamburger, broke it up, threw it in, and it came back soil, or came back material.
Councillor Groenewegen, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Might have missed this, but yeah, I just had a couple of questions. One was, is there anywhere else where you've run a pilot project of this size, the same, similar numbers to Fort Nelson?
Oh, just Nelson.
Just Nelson, okay. Okay.
Not yet. The municipal market is something new that Food Cycler is looking into. We originally got started with the municipalities when Nelson approached us, must be almost a year ago now. And that's actually where we had the idea to consider offering our product at a significantly reduced rate to Canadian municipalities to adopt the technology as an alternative to something like a curbside program. We think our technology is well suited to smaller communities such as Nelson or Hay River, where you might not have the scale for an expensive central site to do anaerobic digestion or curbside collection. And the response we've gotten so far is quite positive, and we think there's a solid niche in communities less than about 15,000 people to adopt this technology as a full municipal solution. So sorry if that was a bit of a roundabout way of answering it, but Nelson is the first, and we're confident it won't be the last.
Great. No, thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Groenewegen?
No, that's all. I guess I was really inquiring about the potential of other pilots, just because I was curious if there had been the possibility of accessing federal or provincial funding in past experiences. But that's really thorough. Thank you.
Sorry, I could actually speak to that a little bit. There is lots of funding available for projects like this. We've spoken with the Green Municipal Fund at the federal level, and they've been quite enthusiastic about doing a project with us. So if this is something you're considering, I'd highly encourage you to speak with GMF, and we'd be happy to participate in that process, and believe this would be eligible for up to 80% funding from them. So definitely open to pursuing that discussion about that further as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Yeah, just to add to that, I think it might be advisable to go to the GNWT resource department, because they're taking money out of our community for grocery bags and this type of thing. We're charging customers 25 cents. So maybe some of the funding that they're collecting can be looked at for this program. It might be an ideal project.
Redistribute. Anything further from council? Nothing noted. I will thank you for your time, and I'm sure we'll have more questions for you both.
And yeah, feel free to reach out if you, for the municipal level, if you guys, if you do end up doing the pilot program, I'm happy to share my resources and my surveys, and you could make them your own. That's what we like to do down here in Nelson. So you guys can have it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ginger.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much
Alex,
for your
appreciate it.
time.
And Sandra, thanks for
Thank
your
you.
time.
And
Thank you very much.
One other thing, you can, like I said, you can come over here and look at this machine. I'm going to have it operating here for a while longer. And so far, I think it's probably the best thing since sliced bread for reducing wastage into that landfill. Because remember, we had $1 million fire last year. So this will prevent that in the future. Anyway, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hi.
Okay. Thanks again. Our second delegation this evening is in regards to a Fort Providence Kakisa transmission line presentation. Rob Marshall is with us tonight, Energy Policy and Program Advisor for the GNWT Department of Infrastructure. Loretta Ransom, Energy Funding, Research and Development Advisor for the GNWT Department of Infrastructure. And Patrick Smith, Environmental Analyst, Intern for Environment and Natural Resources. So I'd like to welcome you, and I'm going to pass the floor over to you.
Great, thank you. This is Rob Marshall. I'll do the presentation. This will be fairly quick. Loretta may chime in with some stuff, and we're going to ask Patrick to just take some notes, and we'll share those notes with you in the next, probably next week sometime. Just before I continue, I want to make sure everybody is hearing me clearly.
Yeah, everybody's good.
Okay, I'm not 100% familiar with this approach to delivering the presentation. So I have about maybe 8 slides. We'll try to keep this to about 10 minutes. So before I get into that, I'm just not sure what you're seeing. And I think Loretta may be trying to bring this up on the screen, but.
Yeah, we have a
Yes.
copy. We've been presented with a copy as well.
Yeah, we do have a copy, Loretta, but I'm pretty sure we can share the screen, get it up on the screen.
Okay, I'm just pulling up the presentation, which I don't see right now. Just one moment. Just not seeing my presentation.
Stacy, can you put it up on the screen? Here it comes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. It wasn't showing up here in my view.
So whoever's driving, I'll just mention when I'm going from one slide to the next. So again, thank you for your time. Our intent tonight was just to introduce this proposed project to council. I'd like to, as the objectives say, just give you an overview of what is proposed, give you a sense of our planned activities this fiscal year and next, and give you a sense of how we're starting out with consultation and engagement. We know we'll need to have some more conversations with council or possibly with administration staff in coming months to work on some details. Again, just looking to introduce it to you tonight. So I'll go to the next slide, slide 3. I'll explain what the project is in a minute, but the GNWT has a long-term energy strategy, a 2030 energy strategy. One of the objectives under that document is to try to reduce the use of fossil fuels and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from electricity generation in diesel communities by about 25%. So the project I'm presenting to you, if it happens, if it proceeds to construction, is a key project in reaching that objective. Specifically, we're hoping to save about 1 million liters of diesel fuel annually, which would be about 3,000 tons of GHG emissions. And the intent of the project is to deliver surplus hydropower from the Tolston system to the communities of Fort Providence and Kakisa, and also serve the Dory Point area. Next slide. So this is a quick overview of the project, and I've got a better map on the next slide. We're proposing to keep this project 100% within the existing highway right-of-way. So that gives us about 30 meters either side of the center line to work with. As you can see from this map, and like I said, I have a better one on the next slide, but the project is proposed to interconnect to the Tolston system at the highway junction of 2 and 5. So it's still within the Hay River municipal boundary. We would propose to put a small substation there, and the new transmission line would be built going south along the highway corridor to Enterprise, through Enterprise, and along to Kakisa and Providence. In total, that's about 170 kilometers of transmission line. Our hope is that this project can be 100% paid for with federal and territorial money, specifically 75% from Canada's Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. The other 25% would come from the GNWT. And if we can achieve that, this would be a gifted asset that the Power Corporation would own and operate and maintain, but it would go into service at zero cost. And in terms of benefits, that would maximize our ability to reduce power rates in the affected communities and allow us to use surplus power off the Tolston system. Next slide, please. So there's a little bit better map. To the right-hand side of the map is the proposed interconnection spot at that highway junction. We don't have a sense of an appropriate site in that area, so that's a key discussion point we would need to follow up with staff on. I'll explain project activities in a minute. However, we are looking to do a full feasibility study later this year and into next year. So before we get that study fully launched, we want to have another conversation with Hay River about potential siting and just describe better what we think that substation looks like. If the project starts there, like I said, it'll go down through Enterprise. We're just starting a conversation with Enterprise, hopefully next week. We're also starting to talk with Northland Utilities. There's the customer for this project. They would buy this power. We're hopeful in those conversations that a byproduct of this project is delivery of better service to Enterprise. My understanding is they're on 2-phase power right now. We may be able to give them 3-phase power through this project. Once it heads past Enterprise, when we get to the Kakisa Highway Junction, there would be another substation and the voltage would be stepped down. So it would start south of Hay River at 72,000 volts or 72 kV, and substation at Kakisa would bring that voltage down to 25,000. And there would be a spur line to serve Dory Point and Kakisa. And from that substation on to Fort Providence, like I said, it would be 25 kV and it would tie into the distribution system at Fort Providence. We'll get across the river using the bridge. We've talked to folks about that. We can install a tray under the bridge and the cable goes across the river that way. And the little box in the corner on slide 5 just gives you a sense that even though we're calling this a transmission line, what it is in effect is a very long distribution line. We're talking poles and wires, again, has to fit inside the highway corridor. There aren't large towers associated with this project. Next slide, please. So some of the things we're working on this year, we've done some preliminary engineering. We've selected this route. We had another routing option that was cross-country, but that would create another disturbance on the landscape and would probably be very hard to get land access for that. So we're doing our best to keep this inside the corridor of the highway, which is already disturbed. We're just working on finalizing an updated project costing. Our notional budget for this project right now is $52 million. We have to make an application to the federal government. I'll come to that in a second. Once we have our project costing later this year, like I said, we'll do a better feasibility study and dig into some of the details necessary, and we'll be able to come back to you in a future date with more information. Another thing we're working on is to get our ISIP funding application into the Government of Canada. They're aware of this project. There's a funding arrangement between the GNWT and Infrastructure Canada, but and there's a pot of money to work out of, but we still must apply project by project to nail down their 75%. So as we get our costing estimate done, we'll get that application in. That's critical for us. It creates the pot of money, if we're successful, that allows for the additional development of the project and for all construction. In parallel with that, we have started consultation with Indigenous groups and with other stakeholders and municipalities. I'll have a few more details on that in a minute. And the other thing we're doing is some preliminary environmental scoping. We're trying to understand what type of environmental study program is necessary for this project. Again, given the fact that it's inside a corridor and not out on the landscape, as most projects are. Next slide, please. So this is just a sense of timelines. We're a little bit off these schedules at the moment. As I said, we do have an ISIP application done, but it's not in, so we haven't yet got any answer from the feds. Our feasibility study will be lined up timing wise with getting a federal answer, but hopefully we can get that rolling this fall. We're just finishing up some environmental scoping, as I mentioned, and later this year, we'd like to do some, over the winter, do some desktop studies and through consultation, figure out what issues that folks may have concerns about. And all of that would be rolled into an environmental program we would do next year. And we'll carry on our consultation with all groups that are interested. Next slide, please. So if things go well this year, what again we're hoping to do next year is a full environmental program that would be baseline studies, field work, and beginning to develop an application for land use permit and water licenses. We're really hopeful we can get everything we need done in the 2021 field season and don't lose a year because we are unable to study some aspect of it. So we're trying to get organized early. And our consultation engagement will continue all the way through that process. The little box on the right-hand side of slide 8 indicates a tentative schedule to transfer this project to NT Energy. That's simply the non-regulated component of the Power Corp. They would be given the budget for managing procurement and construction. Again, we're hoping to do that in 2022 with them, but it'll ultimately depend on the funding decision from Canada and the timing on a regulatory answer. Our intent is to develop all the permits and authorizations for the project and transfer all of that to NT Energy for construction. Next slide, please. We can skip this one. It's just some information about our objectives with doing consultation with Indigenous groups for the most part. So next slide, please. This is our initial list. On the left-hand side are the 9 Indigenous groups that we identified that could be affected by the project. We're about halfway through an initial meeting with each of these groups. We've talked to the town tonight. We're hoping to talk to Enterprise next week, and we've just started a conversation with Northlands. And we're waiting to get a date for Providence. So we're slowly making our way through this list. Once we get through everybody once, we'll figure out how many remain on the list and have an interest, and we'll carry on with them. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a quick sense. I don't think this is important to the council, but we've sent letters to the IGOs. We're talking to them, and like I said, this process will carry on. Next slide, please. So a couple of things on this slide don't pertain to the town, but we're certainly interested in hearing from you that you're interested in ongoing meetings. We expect that's the case. As we have results either from our environmental scoping work or eventually from the feasibility study, we'd be happy to share that. We're going to be open with all these things. So I think that's it for now. The two things I know we need to talk more about is the siting of the substation at the highway junction 2 and 5. And I have a vague understanding that we would need some form of construction permit from the town for the piece of the project that's inside the municipal boundary. But if there are other authorizations we eventually would require, I'm not aware of that at this point, and be happy to hear about that. So that's it for me. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to put it out there. Councillor Goey, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you all for presenting there to us tonight. Just, and I might have missed it, Rob. So 100% of this line, 100% of your transmission line would be owned by the Power Corp? Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions from council? Councillor Grunewagen, go ahead. You're on mute, Jeff, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Rob. Yeah, I just, question I have is, yeah, I'm certainly in support of hydro development in the Northwest Territories. Yeah, I just want to know if you could tell us about any ways that this would directly or indirectly benefit the residents of Hay River.
I don't think that there's going to be any direct benefit. Not aware of anything at this point. And also equally not aware of any negative impact. Like I said, we need to talk about the siting for the substation, but with the budget we're hoping to have from the government, and we will put it wherever we need to and spend the money to do that. I don't think, other than the construction aspect of this, that it has any positive or negative associations for the citizens of the town. But again, the environmental studies would tell us something more about that, and the full feasibility study would give us more detail. But there's nothing on our radar screen at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering what kind of expected usages you get from these communities, and would there still be a surplus in the hydro system?
Absolutely, there'd be a surplus. These communities, a fraction of what's currently available. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but over the years I've heard about, I think 40–50% capacity on the Tolston system all these years later since Pine Point went down. Some of that capacity would eventually get used if the GNWT ever proceeds with the Tolston expansion project, which is under consideration again. But they're also talking as part of that expansion to build more generation. So our project is in no way connected to that larger project. We're just trying to use this funding pot from the government, from the feds, to improve things in a couple of the diesel communities. I don't have percentages. I could find that for you, but no, we would use a very small fraction of what's currently available in the Tolston system.
So my next question would be, the section from Pine Point to Hay River is owned by NUL. Would there be a user fee for those people in Providence and Kikiza and Enterprise for that line?
There wouldn't be, if a couple of ways to answer that question. One is to think of the capital costs. So again, if we're able to get the budget right and get the full support from the federal government, it's our hope this line goes into service at zero cost. So there's nothing to recover capital cost wise from customers in those communities in the future. Normally when power goes from the assets of one utility to another, it's called wheeling, and you can, like as an example, BC will wheel power somewhere and use the Alberta system or use lines in the United States. There's often what's called a wheeling charge. So one utility is paying a fee, if you will, to use the assets of another utility to move its power. We're not sure where Northland would land on that, but it's our expectation that that would not occur in this instance. Northland, while it's their line coming into Hay River that we connect to, and we're using that portion of the line from Pine Point to Hay River to get our power. At the other end of the line, delivering the power back into communities served already by Northland. If we paid them a wheeling charge, it would end up finding its way into their cost of power when that power gets to Providence and Kikiza. So it's probably a wash, but I don't have that answer from Northland yet. We'll see where that comes to.
Okay, anything further questions? Go ahead, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm not, I'm like Jeff, I'm not against the project. It's just that, I've found out more about power, and again, being on council again here, than I want to. Obviously, we have a convoluted system in Hay River where we're buying power from another provider. We're in the process of switching over to the provider, and this seems like it's going to be more convoluted because it's going to be the power corporation is going to be tied with NUL companies again. So it's, it would be a better picture if we knew exactly what the future laid with our power system in Hay River. So just a comment more than a question.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Go ahead, Councillor Dewey.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I guess just to touch on what the deputy mayor alluded to there, I think with what the situation we're in with our franchise and everything, but between NUL and Power Corp right now, it's kind of a weird situation for us to be in. But I guess a question I would have is, there at currently there are no personnel from NTPC in Hay River that would be, I would say, able to maintain that substation or any of those other assets. So I would guess that in the meantime, assuming that the Power Corp ends up with our franchise, that there would have to be some kind of deal with NUL or something on that as well. That'd be fair to say.
I'm sorry, I caught some of that question, but I missed the last 5-10 seconds. It was garbled.
Yeah, Keith, can you just repeat sorry.
Yeah, I apologize, Your Worship. My internet's pretty bad here right now. I guess my question was more around, pending our franchise crossing over to the Power Corp, if there would be some sort of deal worked out with NUL that work on the substation and any of those assets for maintenance would be done locally with NUL, because obviously if we're still with NUL in 2023, there are no personnel in Hay River from the Power Corporation to maintain that. The closest people are in Fort Smith, right?
Closest, I think what he's trying to say, Rob, is that who's going to maintain the substations when Power Corp has their guys over in Smith?
I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. Power Corp is definitely aware of this project. They will be part of the conversation between us, Northlands. As I said, we're just starting that conversation with Northland and need to kind of figure out what all the issues are. Some of them are just technical in terms of how these two different systems will interconnect. I don't have the answer to who would maintain this from a skill set perspective, but it hasn't been brought to my attention that that's a problem either. So we can certainly take note of this and figure that answer out for you and give it to you eventually.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
My question is about so we're adding the length of the hydro system from Fort Smith to Hay River, and now we're going all the way to Fort Province. Now in the summertime, we see a lot of outages because of, I'm assuming, lightning strikes and stuff like that, and maybe bird strikes as well. But now, if you had an outage or a lightning strike between here and Providence, would that put the system down in Hay River, or is it kind of just do you know much about the power system if we're lengthening it, or are you going to expect more outages? Because I think there's some people that are frustrated right now with the amount of outages we have in the summertime.
I'm not an engineer, so again, we would have to take note of this and figure this out in the full feasibility study. But it's my understanding that the substation, one of the reasons for the substation at the Highway 2 and 5 junction is that it completely isolates the two systems. So it's the interconnection point that allows us to take power. But if something happened either south or west of that substation on this new piece of line, no, that should have zero impact on Hay River. It's not as though Hay River would go out if, say, there was a lightning strike near Kakisa or something like that. It's just it's where we would tap into the power available from Tulston. As long as that power in Tulston continues, our line would stay energized. But we would definitely have to make sure there would be no impact on Hay River of an outage on this new line. Should an outage occur, then the existing diesel plant at Fort Providence would be back up, just as Hay River years ago switched to hydro. You still have your diesel plant as backup, which I understand is used a couple days a year. Similar approach would be taken for Providence and Kakisa. So that's their answer to outages. And part of the engineering in the feasibility study is to make sure that that approach, that system, works seamlessly. So customers in those communities don't see a series of outages, like power going down and then diesel coming back up and then diesel going down and hydro coming back up. We need to figure out a way to make this seamless, which is another conversation point with our engineers in the future and with Northland. I apologize, I can't give you a better technical answer. I'm not an engineer. But
Fair
that would be a definite requirement of the design of this project.
Thank you. Anything further from council? None being noted, I'd like to thank you all for your time. Very interesting project, and look forward to talking to you in the future as you hopefully get the funding that you require to carry on. So yeah, we look forward to hearing from you again, and thanks again for your time and filling us in on what's going on.
Great, thank you for the opportunity. And as I said, we'll have notes probably available sometime next week that we'll share with you, just so you've got a record of this.
Thanks.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to item number 8, administrative inquiries. I'm going to pass this over to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll pass the floor up to the Director of Finance, please.
Good evening and thank you, Your Worship. A few updates from Finance and Administration. Q2 O&M and Capital are before Council this evening after being reviewed by the Finance Committee last Thursday. Additionally, we successfully filled the Accounts Payable and Payroll Clerk position. This created a vacancy at our front desk, so we'll be recruiting for this position shortly. Lastly, time flies. We'll be looking to start into our 2021 budget next month. So we're hoping to have the opportunity to engage council and the public a little bit earlier in that process this year and continue to improve on the gains that we made last year. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to SAO Smith. Do you want to take questions first, Glenn?
Sure, yeah, if there's any questions.
Is there any questions from council for our Director of Finance? Okay, none being noted, moving on.
Okay, the Director of Protective Services, please.
Thank you, Worship. Not too much new from our end other than we will have a bylaw officer starting working for the town on September 14th. So from my perspective, that's great news. That's about all I have at this point.
Thank you. Any questions from council? None. Oh, Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
Are we able to release the name? Is it a local resident? Do we know? Sorry.
Probably can't release the name right now, but a Northern Recruitment, so someone familiar with operating in our landscapes, but not from here.
Thank you. Any further questions? Back to you, SAO Smith.
Thank you. The Director of Recreation, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, everyone. Department of Recreation is entering a bit of a shoulder season with summer programming wrapping up, and we're transitioning to fall and winter programs. Transition isn't as typical or as it normally happens given all of the COVID implications, but I can confirm that Summer Heat camp wrapped up on Friday. Our beach attendant program also wrapped up this Monday, and our lifeguards are taking down their equipment from the beach, and we will have fewer staff returning to the community center and preparing or doing some work in the aquatic center. We also have our trail crew continuing with work in some of the areas that are dry enough to continue with work. We had to change the scope of work given all the rain we had this year and the higher the water levels than normal. But they are doing some very good work, especially around some of our trailheads and some day use areas that could use some cleaning up. They will continue to work through September and October with a bit of a smaller crew, given that some of those employees are returning to school. As I mentioned, we are getting ready for fall and winter programming. We'll have a bit of a shoulder season, and during that time, I continue to work with local user groups, GNWT, environmental health officers, and also communicating with some colleagues in other communities that work for recreation departments in other communities. We have confirmed that most of our normal activities and most of our spaces can return to use, but we are submitting a plan for the recreation or the community center to be treated as a recreation complex, because the Emerging Wisely plan doesn't have any specific guidelines regarding recreation complexes. So I'm still working with environmental health to confirm our plans and maximum occupancies and the mitigating measures that we will have in place. We will be reopening spaces gradually within the recreation complex. And we do need to request exemptions for the ice surface. So I'm working with our ice user groups to confirm that they can return to play. That is taking a bit of time, but they each need to submit their own plans, their own return to play plans. And there is precedent in Yellowknife for ice surface or ice sports to return. We just need to make sure that the plans that are submitted for our facilities will meet the JWT's expectations. And we do also expect to submit a request for exemption for our aquatic center to reopen further down the road, looking at likely late October, early November for the aquatic center. But we do need to request an exemption for that specifically. So I am spending quite a bit of time working to try to get our recreation, indoor recreation facilities back to operational, and we should be communicating that gradual reopening fairly shortly to the public there to keep people informed. Those are my updates at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
And I'm not sure if it's specific for Stepa and Recreation, but you know, with the opening of that facility and what we've heard with Yellowknife wanting to go to a in public buildings, have we considered that in the operations and opening of the rec facility, or as a municipality as a whole type thing?
SEO Smith.
Yeah, if I understand, or thank you, Your Worship. If I understand the question, it's around face masks is
That's correct.
in general use. Yeah, so I know the city of Yellowknife last night, I think their original motion was to consider the use of face masks in all of the public facilities, and it was amended so that it was just the transportation system that was used, so that passed as with that amendment. But we've had some discussion. I've had some discussion as recent as today with the Director of Public Works on the topic. I think at this point, it's something that our focus has been on the user groups and employees. We've had various facilities being used throughout the summer with the open air, where the chief public health officer, or sorry, the local environmental health officer has been happy with our plans, and there hasn't been, to my knowledge, any indication that we should be considering it from that level. So I think we probably want to continue to pay close attention to the direction that we're receiving from the chief public health officer, and certainly this council has the ability to make additional bylaws that might be on top of that for extra protection. But it's not something that we've looked at yet as an administration to recommend.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Okay, back to SEO Smith.
Thank you. The Director of Public Works, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the Public Works side of things, the Caribou Crescent project is pretty much wrapped up for this year. Paving will take place next year on that one. There's still a big pile of dirt to move, but other than that, that project's pretty wrapped up. The new lift station project has gotten underway. They did some clearing work there, and now they're working on dewatering and excavating the area just to get ready for construction there. Our Fraser Place Geotech project, they got some of the work completed, ran into issues with some broken equipment that requires some parts that need to be shipped in. So waiting on those parts to arrive so that we can finish that up and get the report for that. We will be starting up our asphalt patching program probably next week. I believe that work should start up here. We're hoping to get our line painting for the summer finished. Weather hasn't really been cooperating with us on trying to get that finished all around town, but we're hoping that we get some nice days so that we can get it done. And that, working on presentations for the water license public hearings, which are coming up September 8th to 10th. We've submitted our presentations, but we still need to have kind of an opening and closing statements to go along with those public hearings. And lastly, we hired a new heavy equipment operator who started on Monday here. So we have one more employee in the Public Works, which is good for us. That's my updates. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I was just wondering about the water line intake inspection. Have we had that done, completed yet?
Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was issues with that. They were in town. They spent 3 days out in the water trying to find our water intake line. Had difficulties due to, I guess, the age of our reports that we have on it, as well as the turbidity in the water there. Visibility was not good. We had hoped that by waiting until this point of the year, it would improve enough that it would be better visibility. But as we're all aware, this has been an unusual year, so the turbidity out there hasn't been great. They will be submitting a report on just kind of the work they did, the areas they checked. We didn't get it inspected. The costs for the work they did will be coming in a lot lower than what it would have been if they had found it and inspected it. So they will also be providing some options for how to move forward, whether it be looking at having them back later in the year or maybe even a wintertime inspection of the line. The good news is when they were in town, they were also able to inspect both of our reservoirs. So the one out at the water treatment plant and the one in town. So they'll have information just on kind of the quality and cleanliness of those reservoirs as well in the report. So once we do get that report from them, there will be more information to share, and we'll be looking at options for how to move forward on the water intake line. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Councillor Groenewegen, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question for the Director of Public Works. For clarity's sake, so they were able to inspect portions of the line, but they weren't actually able to locate the intake. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
No, they weren't able to find any portions of the line or the intake structure itself. They were able to get our reservoirs inspected, and yeah, they were out on the water for 3 days looking for the line and looking for the intake structure without any luck.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from council? I guess I have one question for our director. line painting, it seems crazy that we would be doing it this time of the year. I guess my question would be, after we clean the roads or sweep the roads, why are we not having the line painted then? So it actually, because we're going into winter and halftime can't see them anyway. So it seems to me that this should probably be done earlier.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it should be done earlier in the year, and we usually aim to get it done sooner. I know we've had issues this year with staffing levels as well as with weather conditions. It's rained a lot. We usually try and plan to have it done when we have 2 or 3 sunny days in a row, so that the paint's drying and we're not running into issues with the rain. Typically, we would like to see it done much earlier than this. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. That, I guess that was my question. Is this normal practice or can we be doing it earlier? Thank you for that. Anything further from council? Any other questions? Oh, Deputy Mayor.
Along your lines, is there a reason we just don't maybe skip it for the year? We're this late? I'm gonna say, I hope we're not right around the corner from snow, but we are probably within a month or 2. So I'm just wondering if it's something we need to save for another day.
Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the benefit of doing it this late in the year is that the lines would be a lot more visible when the snow melts in the spring. We could look at skipping it this year, but we have the supplies, and if our guys have the time, I think even if it is only visible for a couple months or even a month and a half or whatever it may be this fall, having them painted now would make them a lot more visible in the spring as well.
Yeah, they're almost non-existent. I tend to agree there that, yeah, hopefully that I believe it's a necessity. We're teaching kids how to drive, and there's 2 lanes in some areas that are not visible at all. So yeah, I believe it's worth the effort. Any other questions from council? And back to SEO Smith.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple points I'll add to that conversation, though. I believe it's probably been at least a month since the first Public Works crews did start the painting. So a percentage certainly did get done, but not as hoped, of course. And to the Public Works, the heavy equipment operator was a local hire. And for myself, a few items. First and foremost, which is relevant to this group and this upcoming Saturday, I've been preparing and working with our facilitator on getting and preparing for our strategic planning update session. So we should expect an agenda out tomorrow. I'm not sure if there'll be any homework, hopefully minimal for you. And we are running from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday at the Doug Wiedemann Hall. Myself and the Director of Public Works did meet last week to discuss some of our planning for the next wave of federal ICIP funding and climate change funding that there's going to be some calls for this winter on. So we are working on a lot of these projects have either been submitted before or in our current long-term capital plan, but there are a couple additions that we're planning. So the idea is to get that list in front of council for review ahead of submission there. Made good progress over the last week with our contractor on our IT side towards finalizing the IT contract amendment, which was approved by council previously, as well as our cloud migration plan that sees work completed this year. So yeah, anticipated cost savings and productivity and disaster recovery benefits are good through that contract. So it's good news to have that expired contract dealt with. Met this week, I guess it was last week now, with the Standing Committee of Government Operations and their discussion on MACA specifically. So I attended that meeting with the mayor and the deputy mayor, as well as the MLAs that sit on that board. on that committee. Most of our concerns and opportunities identified were related to timeliness, some duplication of effort, including what we've seen with our community plan and applications still pending on the disaster relief fund. So it was a good opportunity to get that messaging to that group, and hopefully some promised deliverables that will come out of it. Been working with the Senior Society on a good food access fund that we've received approval on previously, and that agreement has been finalized with the Senior Society. Again, it's the $20,000 funding that will be used for food support programs for the seniors, vulnerable sector, and inclusion in that, the food bank that's administered through the Anglican Church. So we expect to have our first payment to the seniors group for that program administration that hopefully starts next week. Wanted to point out that we had our use of the pavilion this past week as we know, its prominent activity is for supporting the Fisherman's Wharf Market, but we were able to rent the facility for a week-long program that was titled the Dope Experience, which this council issued a letter of support to previously, but good to show that we are finding rental income streams for it, and some indications of other rental opportunities that we're pursuing. Director in Public Works and I also met with a representative from FCM, and we discussed our new town hall construction and any support that could be offered through that federal program. So we did get some positive responses there. So we will be working on putting together a feasibility study and design that would work through that criteria. We also talked about support programs for our asset management interests, and I will be working on an application this week for that. And we are also preparing for significant activity for our organization is collective bargaining. So those dates, those meetings start on September the 8th. I think that's probably about it. I got one point that we have spent a fair amount of time, myself and the mayor, just discussing our community plan and the activities that are needed to try to advance that through MACA, and also some options that might be available for pending rezoning and development pressures that we are receiving as a community government. I also wanted to give out a shout out to the Department of Infrastructure and their highways crews for the brushing and vegetation management that they've been doing in town over the last several weeks, especially that on Vail Island. Our Director of Recreation has had some conversation with them as well about sort of a shared interest that we have, but they've done a good job at opening up some of the sight lines along the trail system in the river, just past the airport lands and into that area. So they've done a good job there in beautification and improving safety aspects for the community. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Any questions for SAO Smith? None being noted. We'll move on to item number 9, new business. 9A, Public Works Monthly Report. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the report. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move the recommendation of the Council of the Town of Hay River accepts the Public Works Monthly Report for July 2020.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Chambers. Any question to the motion? All in favor? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. 9B, letter of support for Pine Point Mining Limited. Looking for a motion. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I move that the Council of the Town of Hay River directs administration draft a letter of support for the Pine Point Mine Limited, Cisco Metals, to accompany their application.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Grunewagen. Thank you. Any questions to the motion? Yeah, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, no, I just think it's important for us. I mean, I think we see most of the benefits from this, the activity, the economic driver. So, yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's important
it's
that
good
we the letter.
It's definitely good for the community. Any other comments, questions from council? None being noted, all in favor? Thank you. Item 9C, asset disposal for Fisherman's Wharf booths. I'm looking for a motion from council. Councillor Chambers, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River approve the disposal through a call for expressions of interest in repurposing of the old Fisherman's Wharf Pavilion booths. If no feasible interests are expressed, the facility can be scrapped with some materials salvaged for future town use or sale.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any questions to the motion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 9D, 2020 Q2 capital update. Looking for a motion. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River approves the QT report on capital as presented as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Seconded by Councillor Dowie. Any questions to the motion? Comments? None being noted, all in favor? Thank you, motion carries. Item 9E, 2020 Q2 O&M update. Looking for a motion. Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I move that the Council of the Town of Hay River approves the Q2 report on O&M as presented, as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Need a seconder for the motion? Councillor Anderson, any questions from council? I think the most, maybe I'll just make a couple comments. One of the most notable things is our revenue's down, but again, property taxes were levied later than expected. So of course they're rolling in slower than normal. So that would impact what you're seeing. Things should straighten out again in Q3 and show better. It'll look better. Anyways, any questions? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 10 is notice of motions, and there being none, I'll move on to item number 11. I'm looking for a motion to go in camera. It'll be a quick one. Councillor Anderson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bouchard, and all in favor? Thank you, guys. I'm going to give you a quick, we'll convene back at 8.